I should have known something was off the moment I got the text. It was from my husband's sister, Julia. Now, Julia and I were never close. Scratch that, she barely acknowledged my existence unless it was to complain about something I did wrong, or relay some passive-aggressive message from their mother. So when her name popped up on my phone with a message that read, "Hey, we're having a small family gathering this Sunday at Mom's house. It's important. Be there at 3 p.m. It's a surprise, so don't tell Matt." No greeting. No explanation. Just a demand. I stared at my phone, my gut screaming that something wasn't right. I showed the text to my best friend Claire, who raised an eyebrow. Wait, why wouldn't Matt know? That's weird, right? Weird didn't even begin to cover it. Matt, my husband, was extremely close to his family. If they were planning something important, he'd be the first to know. But the fact that they told me, and specifically told me not to tell him, felt like a massive red flag. Still, I had to know what was going on. So I sent back a simple, "Sure, see you then." And I didn't tell Matt. Sunday rolled around, and as I drove to my mother-in-law's house, the uneasy feeling in my stomach only grew stronger. Now, I've been to this house countless times before. A massive old-money mansion in Charleston, South Carolina, the kind of house that looked impressive from the outside but felt ice-cold inside. And today? It was worse than usual. The moment I stepped through the door, I knew this wasn't some casual family gathering. The entire family was already there. His mother, his father, Julia, his two brothers, even his aunt and uncle who lived a few states away. And they were all seated in the massive living room, arranged in a half circle like some kind of dam intervention. My pulse quickened. Then I saw it. Sitting in the center of the coffee table was a folder. A thick, official-looking stack of documents neatly placed between them like a silent threat. My mother-in-law, Patricia, smiled tightly. "Sit down, dear." I didn't. Instead, I crossed my arms. "What's going on?" Matt's father, Robert, leaned forward, picked up the folder, and slid it toward me. "We need you to sign these." I stepped closer, my stomach churning as I read the words at the top of the first page. Divorce papers. My breath caught. For a second, I thought it was a joke. A sick, twisted joke. But then I saw Julia smirking in the corner, and my mother-in-law sitting with her hands neatly folded like she had just handled a business transaction. Patricia sighed dramatically, as if this was all terribly inconvenient for her. "We've thought long and hard about this, and it's clear you're not a good fit for this family." I blinked. "Not a good fit?" "You don't respect our traditions," she continued smoothly. "You don't contribute the way a wife should. And frankly, you've been a distraction to Matt's future." I let out a breathy laugh. "A distraction?" Julia leaned back in her chair, her smirk widening. "Let's not act surprised. You know you don't belong here." I scanned the room. Their faces were calm, confident, certain. They really thought they could ambush me, shove divorce papers in my face, and I'd just, what? Sign them? Walk away like an obedient little wife? I took a deep breath, my pulse pounding in my ears. "Where's Matt?" Robert cleared his throat. "He's not here." That stopped me cold. "He doesn't know about this yet," he added. "We're saving him from the stress of having to deal with this situation." Oh, this was worse than I thought. They weren't just suggesting I leave. They were trying to force me out behind his back, thinking that by the time he found out, it would be too late to do anything about it. My hands clenched at my sides. I took a slow step forward, locked eyes with Robert, and asked, "So let me get this straight. You called me here, ambushed me, drafted up divorce papers without Matt even knowing, and you expect me to just sign them, because you said so?" Patricia gave me a condescending smile. "It's for the best." And that's when I smiled. A slow, knowing smile. "Actually," I said, reaching into my bag and pulling out my own folder. I dropped it onto the coffee table with a satisfying thud. "I have a surprise for you too." Silence. Their smug faces vanished instantly. Robert's eyes narrowed. Julia's smirk flickered. I leaned down slightly, voice dripping with amusement. "Go ahead. Open it." Robert reached for the folder hesitantly, flipping through the first few pages. The moment his eyes landed on what was inside, his entire face drained of color. His hands shook as he scanned the pages, flipping through them faster, his breathing growing ragged. Patricia leaned over his shoulder and gasped. Julia snatched a page from the stack, her eyes darting back and forth before snapping up to look at me in horror. How did you? I crossed my arms and tilted my head. I've known for a while now, I said lightly. I was just waiting for the right time. I glanced at my watch and smirked. And guess what? That time is now. Silence. Thick, suffocating silence. Matt's uncle, who had been sitting quietly in the corner, reached over and grabbed a page from the stack himself. His eyes widened. Robert, he said slowly, is this true? Robert's jaw clenched so hard I thought his teeth might crack. Patricia's hands trembled as she slowly set the papers down. She looked up at me, her face pale as death. You have no idea what you've done. I grinned. Oh, I think I do. And right on cue, the front door swung open. Matt stepped inside looking confused as hell. Mom said there was some kind of... He froze. His eyes darted from the divorce papers on the table to the ones I had just thrown down. What? His voice wavered. What the hell is going on? Patricia shot up from her seat, panic flashing in her eyes. Matt, sweetheart, sit down, we can explain, but I cut her off. No need, I said, stepping forward. I turned to Matt. Your family tried to ambush me with divorce papers behind your back, I said casually. Matt's face darkened. They what? I smiled sweetly and tapped the folder in front of him. But don't worry, I added. I brought my own paperwork. And just like that, their entire world started falling apart. Matt's eyes flicked between the two stacks of papers, confusion turning into something darker, something dangerous. What do you mean they tried to ambush you with divorce papers? His voice was low, tight, like he was struggling to keep his anger in check. Patricia forced a laugh, a brittle, fake sound. Sweetheart, don't be dramatic. We were simply having a discussion about the future. I scoffed. Oh, really? Is that why they drafted divorce papers behind your back and tried to force me to sign them before you even knew about it? Matt's expression hardened. You what? His father, Robert, quickly tried to regain control. Son, listen. We were only looking out for your best interest. Your wife. He shot me a glare, has been holding you back. We've been discussing your career, your future, and we realized that being tied down so early, well, it's not what's best for you. I watched Matt's entire body go rigid. I'm sorry, he said, his voice eerily calm, but what exactly makes you think I need you to manage my future? Julia, who had been quiet for too long, rolled her eyes. Oh, come on, Matt. We all know you could be doing so much better if you weren't constantly worrying about her. She flicked a hand toward me like I was a piece of garbage she was dismissing. I raised an eyebrow. You mean the same woman you all were happy to let Matt financially support whenever you needed money? Silence. Yeah, I thought so. Patricia's lips pressed into a thin line. This isn't about money, she said tightly. I smirked. That's funny because according to these documents, I tapped the folder I brought, it absolutely is. Matt finally looked down and picked up the paperwork I had thrown onto the table. The moment his eyes landed on the first page, his entire face drained of color. What the hell is this? I crossed my arms. That, dear husband, is proof that your parents have been draining money from your accounts for years. He blinked. That's not possible. Oh, but it is, I said sweetly. Would you like to know how much money has mysteriously disappeared under family expenses? His hands tightened around the papers, knuckles turning white. This has to be a mistake, he muttered, flipping through the pages faster now. I leaned in slightly. Keep going. It gets better. And then he saw it. The loan. The one where his parents had used our house, our home, as collateral for one of their failing business investments. His breath hitched. I tilted my head. Still think this is a mistake, Matt? His head snapped up. He looked at his father. You took out a loan in my name? Robert's jaw locked. It was temporary. Matt's voice rose. You gambled our house on one of your shady business deals, without telling me? His mother had the nerve to sigh like she was the victim. Matthew, don't be so dramatic. We needed that money to keep the family business afloat. You wouldn't have understood at the time. Matt's face twisted in disgust. You didn't even bother asking me? Julia scoffed. We didn't have to ask. It's family money. And that's when I laughed. I couldn't help it. A full, sharp laugh that cut through the tension in the room. Wow, I said. You all are really that entitled, huh? I turned to Matt, my voice dropping to something quieter, something just for him. They never planned on letting you have control of your own money. They've been using you as a piggy bank for years. And now that they know I'm onto them, they want to get rid of me before I can tell you the truth. His father slammed a fist on the table. That's enough. But Matt wasn't even looking at him anymore. He was staring at Julia. At the one document she hadn't reacted to yet. The one that showed how much money she had taken for herself. His voice was deadly quiet. Julia. She stiffened. What? Matt picked up the bank transfer records and read them aloud. $10,000. Then another 15. Then another 8. His voice shook. You told me you were struggling, that you needed help with your student loans. She shifted uncomfortably. I did. Matt slammed the paper onto the table. So why the hell are there payments under your name labeled investment in Derek's startup? Julia's smirk vanished instantly. Busted. Patricia turned to her, her face a mask of betrayal. Who is Derek? Julia's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. Robert, who had been red with anger before, went completely still. Matt's voice was ice. You told me you needed help. You begged me to cover your rent. You took a step forward. But you weren't struggling. You were stealing from me. And you were giving it to some guy. Julia's panic broke through her face. But before she could say a word, I smiled. And pulled out another paper. Actually, Matt, I said, sliding it toward him, you might want to see this too. His mother, who had been reeling from Julia's betrayal, visibly paled when she saw what I had handed him. Julia's head snapped toward me. You bitch, she hissed. I raised an eyebrow. Now. That's not very ladylike. Matt ignored us both. His hands shook as he scanned the page. This? His voice dropped to a whisper. This is a forged signature. I nodded. Yep. And guess whose signature it is? He slowly lifted his head, eyes burning into Julia. You forged my signature on a loan. And just like that, the entire room exploded. The second Matt said those words, the entire room shifted. Julia froze, her hands clenched at her sides. Patricia gasped, turning to her daughter like she had just been slapped. Robert's jaw tightened, and for the first time that night, I saw a flash of fear in his eyes. Matt gripped the forged document like it was burning his hands. His voice was low, shaking with barely contained rage. You forged my signature. On a loan. Julia swallowed. Art. Matt, just listen, okay? No, he snapped. I'm done listening. You lied to me. You stole from me. And you expect me to just, what? Keep playing along? Robert slammed his hand down on the table, his voice a sharp warning. That's enough. But Matt wasn't backing down. He was finally seeing them for what they really were. His mother clutched his arm, her voice shaking but still dripping with manipulation. Sweetheart, please, you don't understand. Matt yanked his arm away. No, you don't understand. And then, slowly, he turned to me. For the first time that night, his full attention was on me, not his family, not the chaos, just me. His voice was quiet but steady. How long have you known? I met his gaze without hesitation. A few months. He blinked, stunned. And you didn't tell me? I sighed, crossing my arms. Matt, look at what's happening right now. If I had told you back then, would you have believed me? Silence. He didn't answer, because he knew I was right. For years, he had been blind to their manipulation, to the way they controlled him. If I had come to him with accusations before I had solid proof, he would have defended them. He would have called me paranoid, dramatic, hell, maybe even selfish. But now he was seeing the truth with his own eyes. Robert exhaled sharply, shaking his head. You don't get to come into our family and turn my son against us. I snorted. Oh, I think you did that all by yourselves. His mother turned back to Matt, her hands trembling. Baby, you can't let her do this. She's trying to take you away from your family. Matt let out a sharp laugh, but there was no humor in it. Take me away? He repeated, shaking his head. Mom, you've been taking from me for years. And now that you're exposed, you want to play the victim. Patricia's face crumbled, but it wasn't real sadness. It was panic. Because she knew. She knew she was losing him. Julia, who had been suspiciously quiet, suddenly snapped. Fine, she spat, standing up so fast her chair nearly tipped over. Yes, okay? I forged the signature. I took the money. But it's not like you were actually struggling, Matt. Matt's face twisted with disgust. Are you kidding me? Julia rolled her eyes. Oh, don't be so dramatic. You're acting like I stole your life savings. It was just a little financial help and... A little? Matt cut her off, his voice boiling over with rage. You stole thousands from me, Julia. You let Mom and Dad put my house on the line and you? He shook his head, exhaling harshly. You really don't get it, do you? I smirked. She doesn't. Because people like her? They think they can get away with everything. Julia's eyes snapped to mine, burning with hatred. You ruined this family, she hissed. I just smiled. No, honey. I just exposed it. Her father pointed at me, his face turning an ugly shade of red. You need to leave. Now. I raised an eyebrow. Or what? Robert's nostrils flared. Or I'll make sure you regret it. Matt stepped between us instantly. No, Dad. You're done making threats. Robert stilled, his mouth snapping shut in shock. Because for the first time in his life, his son wasn't obeying him. Matt turned to his mother. You had my wife ambushed. You tried to kick her out of our marriage. And why? Because she wouldn't let you steal from me anymore? Patricia opened her mouth, but no words came out. And then, Matt did something that completely shattered their world. He turned to me, jaw tight. Where do I sign? My breath caught. I wasn't expecting him to say that so quickly. But I smiled, reaching for my folder. Right here. His father shot up from his chair. You are not signing that. Matt ignored him. He took the pen and signed. His mother gasped like he had just stabbed her in the chest. Julia's face twisted in horror. Robert's fists clenched so hard his knuckles turned white. But it was done. The moment Matt's signature hit the page, he was free. His voice was steady. I'm done with all of you. His mother shook her head frantically. No. No, you don't mean that. Matt took a deep breath, then turned to me. Let's go. And just like that, we walked out of that house together. Behind us, I could hear his family screaming, but they weren't yelling at us. They were yelling at each other. Because now they had to deal with the mess they created. And we were finally free. The moment we walked out of that house, I felt lighter, like I had just cut a dead weight off my shoulders. But I knew this wasn't the end. People like Robert, Patricia, and Julia? They don't just accept consequences. No, they fight tooth and nail to claw their way out of the mess they created. And I was right. Because within 24 hours, they launched their counterattack. I woke up the next morning to my phone blowing up with messages. At first, I thought it was just people checking in after last night's disaster. But then I saw it. Julia had posted on Facebook, and the post was going viral in their social circle. It's heartbreaking when someone you welcome into your family turns out to be a snake. We always treated her like a sister, and yet she manipulated my brother, turned him against us, and nearly ruined our parents' lives. Some people will do anything for money. Prayers for our family during this difficult time. The audacity. I scrolled through the hundreds of comments, mostly from people who didn't know the full story. Family, friends, distant relatives, nosy acquaintances, all of them eating up Julia's lies like they were gospel. Oh my God, I'm so sorry you're going through this. I always had a bad feeling about her. She probably forced Matt to cut you off. Classic gold digger move. I laughed out loud. Oh, this was hilarious. They thought they could flip the script on me? They thought they could paint themselves as the victims while Matt and I were the villains? I cracked my knuckles. Let's play. I didn't waste time. I opened my own social media, typed out a short, simple post, and hit send. You ever get ambushed by your in-laws, handed divorce papers, and told to sign them without your husband even knowing? And then, when you expose their financial fraud, they try to flip the narrative? Crazy world we live in. Anyway, receipts in the comments. Enjoy. Then I attached screenshots of everything. Of the financial documents showing the stolen money, of the proof of the forged loan in Matt's name, the text from Julia bragging about tricking Matt into signing things he didn't read, of the legal paperwork Matt signed to cut them off completely, and the comments section. Oh, it exploded. Holy SHT, they really tried to scam him? Asterisk. Damn, I used to feel bad for Julia, but this is next level evil. Lol, not them getting exposed this hard. Patricia really thought she was the main character. Nope. Julia deleted her post within hours. By then it was too late. Because not only did I expose them, but my receipts had spread like wildfire. Screenshots got shared, people were talking, and suddenly they weren't just losing Matt, they were losing their reputation too. And that was just the beginning. Public humiliation was one thing, but I knew it wasn't enough. People like Robert, Patricia, and Julia? They didn't fear being called out. They feared losing their money, their influence, and their cushy lifestyle. And lucky for me, that was already happening. After Matt and I finalized the legal paperwork, I handed everything over to a forensic accountant and a lawyer. Every shady bank transfer, every hidden transaction, and every forged document. Turns out, when you funnel money from your son's account to fund your failing business, the IRS doesn't like that very much. Within a few weeks, an investigation was officially launched into Robert's finances. His business? Already struggling. But now, with an IRS audit breathing down his neck, his investors started panicking. Word spread fast in their social circle. Suddenly, clients started backing out, suppliers hesitated to work with them, and even their business partners were looking for an exit strategy. Within 2 months, Robert was forced to sell off major assets just to cover debts. The family business, the one they had used as leverage against Matt for years, gone. Matt and I watched from a distance as the company was sold to an outside competitor, someone who had zero loyalty to the family. The name, the legacy, the empire? Completely erased. And just like that, Robert lost everything. As if losing the business wasn't enough, Julia had her own problems to deal with. The forensic accountant didn't just expose the fraud involving Matt, they uncovered Julia's secret transactions too. Fake invoices. Wire transfers to accounts under fake names. Payments sent to Derek, her mystery boyfriend. Oh, and the best part? Some of these transactions were made under the company's name. Which meant Julia wasn't just a thief, she was an embezzler. And when the new company owners found out, they pressed charges. Within weeks, Julia was arrested for fraud, embezzlement, and identity theft. She tried everything to talk her way out of it, blaming me, Matt, the accountants, even her own father, but it didn't matter. She was officially charged, and to avoid jail time, she had to pay back every cent she had stolen. But with no job, no family business to support her, and no reputation left to save her, she had nothing. Last I heard, she was working a minimum wage job, drowning in legal fees, and completely cut off from the high society lifestyle she once flaunted. Oh, and Derek? Yeah, he dumped her the moment the money dried up. Poetic. Now, Patricia, she thought she could ride out the storm. She was used to being the puppet master, pulling strings behind the scenes, using guilt and manipulation to get what she wanted. But this time, there was nothing left to manipulate. Her husband's business was gone. Her golden child was ruined. Her reputation was shattered. And remember the house she used to ambush me? Yeah, well, turns out that was on the chopping block too. Since Robert and Patricia had taken multiple loans against their assets, including their luxury home in Charleston, the moment their business collapsed, so did their ability to keep up with payments. And with no family business, no secret money from Matt, and no wealthy connections to bail them out, they lost the house. Patricia went from being the queen of high society to living in a cheap rental, trying to hold on to whatever scraps of her old life she could. But no one cared anymore. Because without money, influence, and a powerful family name to hide behind, she was nothing. For the first few weeks, Matt was quiet. I could tell he was still processing everything. The fact that his own parents had been stealing from him, that his sister had been scamming him for years, and that they had tried to destroy our marriage just to cover their tracks. And then one night he finally said it. I don't think I ever really knew. Them? He murmured, staring down at his hands. I reached over, lacing my fingers with his. Yeah, you did. You just didn't want to see it. His throat tightened. I feel like an idiot. I squeezed his hand. You're not. You just wanted to believe the best in them. He took a deep breath, then let it out slowly. But now, I see them for what they really are. I smiled. And that's why they lost. Because the real loss for Patricia, Robert, and Julia wasn't just their money or their status. It was losing Matt. He was the only thing holding their entire scheme together. And now he was done with them for good. Matt finally cutting them off was the last piece of the puzzle. His parents and Julia were financially ruined, their reputations destroyed, and their carefully built empire had crumbled into nothing. But people like them? They don't go down without a fight. The first sign of their desperation came through endless calls and messages, all variations of the same tired script. Patricia sobbed in voicemails, begging Matt to come home, talking about how they were still family and how a son should never abandon his mother. Robert tried the authoritative approach, calling Matt childish and telling him it was time to be reasonable. And Julia, ever the bitter brat, accused him of being weak, manipulated, and promised that one day he'd regret it. The difference now? Matt wasn't falling for it. He deleted their messages without a second thought. But when the private guilt trips failed, Patricia made one last desperate play, the public meltdown. One morning we woke up to a dramatic Facebook post from her, playing the heartbroken mother abandoned by her ungrateful son and his gold-digging wife. It was a masterpiece of manipulation, painting herself as the victim and pleading for sympathy from their social circle. Unfortunately for her, I had been prepared for this moment. Within minutes I posted my own response. Short, direct, and absolutely brutal. Funny. How people play the victim after being exposed for fraud, theft, and trying to ruin their own son's life. But don't worry, Patricia, I'll let the receipts speak for themselves. I attached the financial documents, the proof of stolen money, the forged loans, the text from Julia bragging about tricking Matt into signing things. Within an hour, my post had more engagement than hers, and the comments? They tore her apart. People who once supported her were now horrified. She had no way to spin the truth. 24 hours later, her post was gone, and just like that, she had lost the one thing she cherished most, her social standing. With no business, no money, and no one left to manipulate, Robert was forced to sell off everything. The once proud businessman had to take a low-level consulting job, earning a fraction of what he once did, his reputation permanently stained. Julia, facing criminal charges for embezzlement, was blacklisted from every industry she had connections in. With no income and no support, she had to move out of state and work dead-end jobs just to survive. Her boyfriend Derek, the one she had stolen for, he vanished the moment she lost access to her family's money. Patricia, with nowhere left to turn, moved into a tiny rental in a city where no one knew her name. The woman who once thrived on control now had nothing, no influence, no money, no friends. She tried one last time to reach out to Matt, but he ignored her. As for Matt and me, we finalized the divorce and I got everything I was entitled to. Matt and I stayed friends, and for the first time he was free from the chains of his family's expectations. I took my settlement, moved to a new city, and built a life that was 100% my own. No toxic in-laws, no manipulative schemes, just peace. And the best part? I never heard from any of them again. Because in the end, the best revenge isn't just about destroying your enemies, it's watching them destroy themselves. With Matt finally cutting off his family, you'd think they'd accept defeat. But people like Patricia, Robert, and Julia? They don't just disappear quietly. No, they fight, clawing at whatever power they have left, desperate to regain control. And when their emotional manipulation failed, when their social standing collapsed, when their bank accounts ran dry, they did what every desperate, pathetic narcissist does. They lashed out in one last spectacularly stupid move. It started with a lawyer's letter. A cease and desist from Patricia, claiming that my public posts had caused irreparable harm to her reputation and emotional distress. Oh, I laughed. I laughed so hard that Matt looked over at me like I had lost my mind. Did she really think she could intimidate me into silence? The woman who literally tried to force me into a divorce behind Matt's back, stole from us and nearly made us lose our home? No, no, no. She was about to learn that I don't play by her rules, I play by mine. Instead of responding, I sent the letter straight to my lawyer, who promptly countered with a lawsuit for defamation and intentional infliction of emotional distress. But I wasn't done. Oh no. Since Patricia wanted to claim she was the victim, I figured the legal system should take a closer look at her actual crimes, like the financial fraud she committed against her own son. I worked with a forensic accountant, compiling every single instance of money they siphoned from Matt's accounts, every shady business loan, every forged document. The IRS, the State Fraud Department, and our bank's legal team were all very interested in what I had to share. And Patricia? She had no idea what was coming. Within weeks, the financial investigation into her and Robert's fraudulent activities was officially opened. Their assets were frozen, their bank accounts flagged, and suddenly, Patricia wasn't just worried about her social reputation. She was staring down possible criminal charges. Robert, the ever-proud businessman, tried to negotiate, tried to reason, even reached out to Matt, claiming they could fix this if we just let it go. Matt didn't even reply. But the real cherry on top? Julia. Because while Patricia and Robert were scrambling to cover their tracks, Julia was making things worse for herself. See, Julia had been in serious debt even before all of this went down. She had been living off of stolen money for years, using her father's company like her personal bank account. And when that business collapsed, when Patricia and Robert no longer had cash to throw at her problems, Julia did what she always did. She scammed someone else. Unfortunately for her, that someone else had no patience for her games. She had started working under the table for a small finance firm, handling transactions for wealthy clients. But instead of actually doing her job, she funneled money into a fake account she had set up under a different name, hoping to skim just enough to stay afloat. Too bad she wasn't as smart as she thought. It only took 3 months before her employer caught on, and guess what? They pressed charges. So now, while her parents were drowning in legal battles over fraud and unpaid loans, Julia was being hauled into court for embezzlement. And unlike before, she couldn't just talk her way out of it. She couldn't run to Daddy to make it disappear, couldn't guilt-trip Matt into bailing her out. She was alone, facing the full weight of her actions, and from what I heard, she folded fast. She took a plea deal to avoid jail time, but the consequences were brutal. She had to pay back everything she stole, got permanently blacklisted from the finance industry, and lost every last shred of credibility she had left. And me? I sat back and watched it all crumble. Patricia and Robert lost everything: their house, their assets, their luxury lifestyle. They filed for bankruptcy to escape the lawsuits, but it didn't save them from IRS investigations and fraud charges. Last I heard, they moved into a rundown rental, living off whatever scraps of retirement savings they had left. Their once glamorous high society friends? Gone. The family business they spent years using to control Matt? Sold off, rebranded, erased from existence. Julia? She was working some miserable job in another city, drowning in legal fees and debt, unable to ever hold a position of power again. The golden child? She had become the family disgrace. And Matt? For the first time in his life, he was free. After the divorce, he took time to rebuild himself, without their influence, without their manipulation. He eventually started his own business, something completely separate from his family's legacy, something that was his and his alone. We stayed friends, and honestly, he was happier than I had ever seen him. As for me, I took my settlement and moved to a new city, where I built a life that was 100% mine. No toxic in-laws, no chaos, just peace. And the best part? I never heard from any of them again. No more threats, no more fake apologies, no more attempts to manipulate their way back into our lives. Because they knew. They knew that they had already lost everything. Sometimes the best revenge isn't just about destroying your enemies. It's watching them destroy themselves.